I am doing big things. I kept trying to do stuff my way, and I couldn't find any research papers. I found lots of scientific papers written, but nothing in the aquatic field. And then there's not a lot of data in the aquatic field. I mean, there's drowning prevention data, which I appreciate, and I like that that exists. But even that, I feel, has loopholes in it. And what I'm looking for is more with the developmental readiness, and you see that a lot in land-based activities like Montessori preschool and just trauma awareness. But you don't see any of that in the aquatic field. So as I go to different places, I meet a lot of people that are doing the same things that I'm doing, but none of that data is being recorded. And I'm familiar with the American Red Cross and how they have you go in and you put down who you taught, and it's very generic. You're not telling the names of the kids. You're just telling what level, which is important. I mean, the Red Cross does have their objectives on all that, but we're looking for more data like who brought the child to the lesson. If a child is brought to a lesson by the same parent each time, that's a different outcome than if mom brings you, dad brings you, or even nanny or big sister brings you. And all of that plays into the learning, especially if there's any adaptive issues or if they've had trauma, or even if they're the firstborn or the thirdborn child. And that is also another tag that we wanted to tag in our data is, are you the firstborn child? Are you the second? What is your birth order? Because that is also important for how effective our objectives are met and how quickly we get through the material. I have not collected any data with my swim school. I collected data with Joyful Waters, which is the curriculum I wrote. And I started collecting data when I created the curriculum because my big hopes and dreams is that we could get that material nationally accredited. And I knew without having data, that would not be a thing. As I was talking to other people about that, I realized that there's other stuff that we should be looking at. So no one, to my knowledge, has started collecting this data. I've just been kind of dropping the seeds that we need to. As I did that, I talked with some speech pathologists and I talked to some other people that do behavioral analysis and do home charts. And so we've been partnering together to get a good map of what needs to be collected. And then I have spoken with a medical based organization and said, hey, this is what we want. Would you be willing to house this data or, set up? I mean, I could do it on Jotform or Google, but I just figured we would want something more secure and bigger and better. I talked to them and they're meeting with their board and they're going to get back to us. And then we have two more people that we're going to ask. So it's not going to be something that just a swim instructor puts on a Google hard drive and has the data there. It's going to be a big database and it's going to allow anybody that's teaching. So, like I mentioned before, the people I meet that are doing swim lessons, these are not YMCA instructors. This is not at a YMCA. A lot of these are doing stuff at hotel pools or they're partnering with private facilities and they're doing really tailored curriculum, like children who have speech issues or children who are adaptive, they have other issues. They may come in a wheelchair, and the parents are not looking for a quick fix where you just toss the kid in the water. They're kind of going towards aquatics, just like they go towards all the other therapies that the kids get. And we don't see any data on that. And what really was my trigger point here is I was talking to one of my friends who moved back up to Michigan, and her boss, she works at the university, wanted her to start teaching some adaptive adults. And there's nothing that she can use. Like there's no certificate that she can go get for adaptive adults. And there's nothing really out there. And so when you're looking at it from that angle, when you're a professional teaching at a university and you want something, that nothing really exists. And that goes back to the scientific papers or any research or data that says what is effective, what isn't effective, what's right and what's wrong. I don't want to name drop them just in case they back out, and I also don't want to name drop who the other 2 in line are, but all of them are big because we wanna do an IRB review, and we're not partnering with the university, so if anyone's listening and is interested in picking up on this, we wanna collect data. When we're pulling this information in, we want it to be twofold. We do want to collect data on a very narrowed base for an IRB level review or research. And at the same time, while people are in that database putting their numbers in, we want more information. Your pool, is it a hotel pool? Are you with a Y? Are you an instructor? for who, who are you certified through? Maybe it's Autism Swim, maybe it's Swim Angelfish, maybe it's just a WSI, maybe you made your own stuff. And then we're looking at really all those little itty bitty pieces, like what birth level you are and who brought you to lessons, and did your lessons stay at the same pool the whole time? Some people are at one pool in the summer, and since they're not an organization, they then partner with another pool in the winter. So that is information that we want. Ultimately, whoever makes this database for us, they would kind of be holding all of this data, and then they can give it to whoever they want and use it for whatever research purposes we deem appropriate, or that the United States needs. But we want it easy. We want it easy. You have a username, you log in, and you put your data in there. We want information from both the parent and the instructor. So we don't just want the instructor's take on it. If you're in my lessons and you're going through my program, I'm going to say, hey, go here and fill this out at the start of the session. And then at the end of the session, we ask the parent to do it again. So we're collecting data from both the instructor and the parents at the beginning and at the end. And we feel that is crucial because that's what's missing in the other. I mean, that's not what the CDC was collecting, but the CDC was researching drowning. We're not looking at drowning here. We're looking at the developmental side of aquatic. UK just showing us that African Americans can float. I mean, I feel any instructor in aquatics already knows that those are true. We know that a baby can float and we know that African Americans can float. But until that research was done, there wasn't a scientific paper to say, here's the fact. And that's what we're looking at here. So I would have to say that that's the closest that already exists.
And what did you call it? Cats or
Yeah, CAST. It's CAST. It's they just put it all over Facebook. They're essentially a swim float swim program. I'm not. Let me see if I can tell you. I don't know where it's out of, but I thought they had the little otter. Um, it's swim float. It came up right away. They are a nonprofit organization focused on water safety and education, but CAST is just casting hope for safe swimmers, and it's a little baby otter on its back.
okay.
And they did research, but with theirs, their research is just for their curriculum, similar to what I was trying to do with Joyful Waters, was to prove the objective is met in the Joyful Waters curriculum. That's what they did. And that's important because that doesn't exist. So Joyful Waters is curriculum that I designed after I had students come to me and couldn't swim. They would come to me traumatized, or they would come to me fearful and afraid. And primarily, I do babies, but I also do adults. Where I am in the United States, I get a lot of adults that are going to join Custom and Border Patrol, and they have to pass a swim test. And a lot of times, they can pass the swim test, but they can't pass the float test. And the swim test is just to get from point A to point B. And I'm sure you're familiar. Any swimmer can kind of beat up the water and get across the pool without being a good swimmer. And then they lack the rest of the fundamentals they need to get out of that course. And they don't want to. They want to pass. They don't want to be sent home as soon as they arrive. So I developed it for both of those, but it's trauma aware, developmentally informed approach to teach early aquatic education. So it's not that the learner is young, it's just the early part of aquatics, like what you need to grasp to be sent there. The core belief is that a regulated body learns faster than a forced body. And of course, this is true for adults. If I have a 27-year-old man in the pool, I can't force him like I would a baby. But what it became more of is the baby led, because we got kids that would come from different organizations, or they just didn't have a good experience at home. Maybe their cousins played too rough, or their parents just tried to toss them in like grandpa did. And then they kind of go into that freeze or fight or flight mode. So, you're trying to get a 3-year-old to do something. And instead of doing their scoops or doing their bubbles, which why wouldn't the 3-year-old want to play the game with us? They're almost in this freeze response. So it goes backwards to help regulate. So it's more of a method and a philosophy than it's just a program. I actually had some people at my last workshop ask about it. So I put a quiz on my website where you can take a test and you can find out if you teach the Joyful Waters way. I do have the curriculum on my page for free. There's 2 manuals. One is just for the babies, because babies are huge. There's so many different avenues to look at and developmental stages I go through with the babies to make sure that we're not harming them any further. It's because it's trauma aware and it's that early approach. It's really just developmentally informed. And what we've seen is that kids that are going through therapy, maybe they were born early and they're not eating yet, or they're not walking yet, or they're not crawling yet. It's almost like Joyful Waters was therapy for them. They were milestones ahead of where they were when they started, and they're ahead of their peers on land-based therapy just because of the 3 to 5 days a week they had in the water. So we thought that was worth documenting, and keeping that for research. The other kids did just as well, but we saw a greater increase with the kids who were behind. Um, and that's usually because they were a preemie or they had a birth defect that was taken care of right after birth, and they were just behind, and the water sped them up. But it also works well for the guys that need to float in 6 weeks for their degree. So we found it to be very helpful.
So tell me about those adults then, as far as the job readiness, what happens there?
So, for Custom and Border Patrol, I didn't know you have to swim, and you don't really have to swim. You just have to get from point A to point B, but then you also go in an aircraft. You can see these videos on YouTube, and they turn the aircraft upside down, and then you have to get out of your seat and get up to safety. So if they have any trauma or if they're not comfortable in the water, they they freeze on that, and then if they fail, they go home. So we work a lot with it, not like it's a swim lesson, not like it's swim team, but just self-regulating. Like, we go underwater, we do bobs, we do all of our floats, and a lot of these men can't float because they're really good runners, and they even swim across the pool fast, but they haven't calmed down enough to get the balance and the breath control and trust their buoyancy. So sometimes you're lacking breath control, which is an easy fix. Sometimes they just don't trust the buoyancy, and sometimes it's just like a teeter totter, and we're finding their level of buoyancy, which they really just didn't know. So I'll use Jose's dual boards, or I use noodles tied in knots, and we're just letting them feel that and getting the breath work down. And then, with that emotional safety, they float. But it takes a little bit of time, especially with the underwater. If there's trauma and they have to go underwater, they do have on a BC, so it's not a life jacket, but it's a BC, and it's in a pool and it's clear. It's not like they're in the ocean, so it's a very safe environment. But it's still very traumatizing to fall upside down in an aircraft, and get out. And it's an easy test. You're just going to escape. But if you have any panic or fear there, they come to me first and we work on that for 5 weeks. And I usually only see them once a week, and I give them homework. So when they're at their facility, they can train with a teammate, or I even let them go to the local Y where there's lifeguards. But I don't need to see them 5 days a week. They have a life. I just write out that routine and I kind of do a weekly evaluation or checkup. But that is in my Joyful Waters curriculum, or not the baby one, but the everybody else. So whether you're an elementary kid or a teenager or an adult or even an elderly person that wants to learn to swim, it's that same core foundation that we're getting. That is at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. It's called FLITSI. That is where everybody comes. Usually, everybody for Custom and Border Patrol goes there. And I'm right outside of that facility, so I'll get the adults that think they can swim. They come on day one, and I think they test them on day one, and I'll get a phone call. Hey, can you help me? I can help you. They do PT every morning, and then they go to class all day. And it's like a 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. They want to learn to swim, they go anywhere. If they're a little afraid or hesitant, or the first 2 lessons didn't work, they come to me. But I don't have time to teach everybody, which is another reason I put my curriculum up for free. I don't think it'll get accredited, or I'll have enough research to do anything if I'm the only one doing it. I didn't want to gatekeep it. I wrote it all down actually in a book because my instructor said, "Tell me more." And I'm like, "I have told you everything. You have taught beside me. You have sat on the deck and watched me and taken notes." I'm like, "I don't know what else to do." So I just sat down and started writing it all out. So, Joyful Waters for the Babies, that book was created because I just wrote it for my instructor. And then as I kept going, I realized more people, had questions. A lot of people do great with this. And they come from different industries outside of aquatics, and then aquatics tends to be their passion. So they get in and they help. and they do well. But there's no magic here. It's just nervous system regulation. Make sure they feel safe, and once somebody's safe, they can learn.
Our new TV show, Heavy or Not, has a deep dive associated podcast too. Stay in touch so we can include your wisdom in these endeavors. Sign up at swimi.org.